Ibrahim Traoré's actions on that battlefield were more than tactical brilliance. They were a testament to the power of courage, loyalty, and moral clarity in moments when the world seemed determined to crumble around him. He didn't just save a life. He proved that leadership is defined not by titles, but by the choices we make when everything is on the line. His best man survival was a result of calculated risk, unshakable focus, and an unwavering commitment to the people who depended on him. This mission reminded the world that heroism is not the product of chance, but deliberate, principled action. Every soldier who witnessed the rescue, every ally who heard the story afterward, felt the ripple of inspiration. The battlefield had tested every skill, every instinct, and every ounce of moral courage Traoré had honed over years of service. And in that test, he emerged not only victorious in action, but victorious in character. It's a story that transcends politics and conflict. It speaks to the universal value of standing by those who rely on you, of acting with precision and conscience, and of refusing to let fear dictate decisions. If you were inspired by Traoré's heroism, don't let this story end here. Subscribe to witness more moments where courage, loyalty, and integrity triumph against the odds. Share this video to remind others that true leadership is earned through action, not words. Comment below and join a community that values moral strength, resilience, and the unshakable bonds of loyalty. Because in a world full of uncertainty, stories like Traoré's remind us that bravery, strategy, and heart can change everything. Be here to witness the next moment when heroism rises and ordinary courage becomes extraordinary. In the chaos of conflict, moments of true character are revealed not in words, but in action. Traoré's rescue was more than a daring extraction under fire. It was a testament to what leadership, loyalty, and courage can accomplish when pressed to the edge. The battlefield had demanded everything from him: his skill, his intuition, and his moral compass. Yet, he had acted with a clarity that elevated him above the immediate chaos, demonstrating that true strength is measured not by force alone, but by the choices made when stakes are highest. Loyalty emerged as the cornerstone of this story. Traoré had risked his life to save a comrade, not for recognition or glory, but because loyalty is not conditional. It is a commitment to those who depend on you. In that single act, he reaffirmed a principle too often spoken of but rarely embodied, that bonds forged in trust and tested under fire are unbreakable. His courage was inseparable from this loyalty, a courage that was measured, purposeful, and unwavering. It was not reckless heroism. It was the courage of a man who understood that every decision carried consequences, and yet chose action over inaction, integrity over convenience. Strategy, too, was a critical lesson woven through every step of the rescue. Traoré demonstrated that leadership is not only moral, but intellectual. He read the battlefield, anticipated the enemy's moves, and leveraged both terrain and timing with precision. This was not improvisation born of panic. It was calculated decisiveness, a reminder that effective leadership combines courage with intellect. The rescue showed that the most profound victories are often those where careful planning meets the willingness to act decisively when conditions demand it. Strategy without courage is theory. Courage without strategy is recklessness. Traoré fused the two, producing an outcome that inspired awe and reverence among allies and adversaries alike. The moral strength displayed in that moment transcended the battlefield. Traoré's actions were a reflection of values that resonate universally. The belief that protecting those who depend on you is non-negotiable, that honor and empathy are inseparable from authority, and that sacrifice, when guided by principle, creates ripples far beyond the immediate. This was not merely a story of a soldier saving a friend. It was a demonstration of how leadership grounded in ethical responsibility can inspire, transform, and endure. For audiences watching, particularly those who understand struggle, displacement, or the weight of responsibility, Traoré's actions offer validation. They show that courage and loyalty are not abstract ideals. They are lived, tangible, and replicable. They teach that in moments of fear, clarity of purpose can prevail, that in moments of chaos, moral integrity can guide decision-making, and that the choices of one individual can change the trajectory of many. It is a call to recognize the power of steadfastness, both in personal and collective life. The rescue also underscores a universal truth about human connection. Leadership is not about authority or rank, but about responsibility, empathy, and action. Traoré's heroism was defined by his refusal to abandon those entrusted to him. by his ability to act decisively without hesitation, and by his unwavering belief that every life has value. The battlefield was merely the stage. The lesson is timeless, applicable wherever courage, loyalty, and moral strength are required. In the quiet moments after the firefight, as soldiers processed what they had witnessed, the significance became clear. What had been achieved was not merely a tactical victory. It was proof that principled leadership can bend the tide of circumstance, that ethical courage can overcome chaos, and that loyalty, when lived fully, inspires those around you to rise to their highest potential. Traoré's actions illuminated a path forward, one where integrity and decisiveness are inseparable, and where sacrifice is the price paid for preservation of human dignity. In the end, the rescue wasn't just a battlefield victory. It was a lesson in true leadership. The immediate danger had passed, but the battlefield remained alive with tension. Soldiers cautiously emerged from cover, their eyes wide with disbelief and renewed determination. The story of Traoré's decisive rescue spread like wildfire through the ranks. Whispered at first, then spoken aloud with growing awe. He saved him under fire without hesitation. Morale surged, a tangible force lifting exhausted men from despair to purpose. The impossible act had shown them that leadership was not a title, but a living, breathing force that could turn fear into courage, chaos into coordinated action. Where panic might have spread, confidence now took root, driven by the example of a man who embodied clarity under pressure. The enemy, meanwhile, faltered. Their formations, once precise and menacing, wavered as uncertainty crept in. Soldiers hesitated, eyes darting nervously across the smoke and debris, sensing that their presumed dominance had been challenged. They had underestimated the audacity and skill of a leader who refused to bow to circumstance, and the result was chaos in miniature. Strategic overreach, miscommunication, and growing hesitation. Their arrogance, once a shield, now betrayed them. Each misstep, they made reinforced perception that Traoré was more than a soldier. He was a tactical mind capable of rewriting the rules of engagement in real time. Beyond the battlefield, news began to ripple outward. Allies and observers relayed the story to commanders and journalists alike, each retelling emphasizing the bravery, precision, and loyalty on display. Within hours, military communications buzzed with reports of the incident, admiration interwoven with incredulity. Political analysts took note, framing the event as evidence of a new type of leadership, one grounded not in rhetoric or intimidation, but in decisive action, moral clarity, and unwavering loyalty to one's comrades. Conversations shifted, alliances recalibrated, and even distant factions took stock of the man whose actions defied expectation. Social networks, too, became conduits for the story. Images and messages circulated rapidly. Small clips of strategic positions, snapshots of soldiers emerging from cover, account of the rescue told in vivid, dramatic detail. Hashtags emerged almost immediately, celebrating courage, loyalty, and leadership under fire. The narrative struck a chord with those who valued heroism grounded in integrity, inspiring admiration among communities that saw in Traoré a reflection of principles they held dear. For immigrants, for those who had witnessed struggle and marginalization, the story resonated deeply, a testament that determination, skill, and conscience could overcome the most harrowing circumstances. Allies who had previously been uncertain about the mission's prospects felt a surge of renewed faith. Confidence, once fragile, became contagious. Soldiers trained under Traoré now moved with a cohesion born of respect and trust, knowing that their leader would act decisively, protect them, and reward their loyalty with strategic foresight. The ripple effect extended beyond immediate personnel. Military planners reconsidered tactics, logistical support shifted priorities, and communications channels lit up reports that emphasized not just survival, but the demonstration of exemplary leadership. Even enemy commanders took note, recognizing that the man they had assumed they could intimidate operated on an entirely different plane. Their reports reflected frustration, miscalculations, and a growing sense that conventional strategies would no longer suffice. The incident had exposed cracks in their arrogance, sowed doubt among their ranks, and forced reconsideration of tactics. Traoré had done more than save a life. He had destabilized an enemy through a combination of moral authority and strategic brilliance. The political reverberations were subtle but significant. Observers in distant capitals recognized that a leader who combined tactical acumen with ethical conduct could shift perceptions on both a regional and global scale. Traoré's actions were interpreted as a demonstration of integrity in a world often ruled by opportunism and fear. Comrades, allies, and even skeptics began to see him not merely as a soldier, but as a symbol of what decisive, principled leadership could achieve when courage met conscience. Within hours, the battlefield had transformed. Where despair had threatened to dominate, hope now took root. Where the enemy had assumed superiority, hesitation now spread. And across communication channels, both formal and informal, Traoré's heroism became a reference point, a standard against which courage, loyalty, and leadership would be measured. The narrative was clear. This was a leader who acted with unwavering resolve, whose presence elevated those around him, and whose actions sent ripples far beyond the immediate conflict. The world may not have witnessed it live, but the echoes of this act would be felt for months. Traoré dropped to one knee behind a crumbling wall, his gaze sweeping the battlefield with surgical precision. Every muscle in his body coiled like a spring, every sense heightened. The enemy's shadows flickered against the smoke-choked terrain, their positions obvious to anyone with the patience to observe, but deadly to underestimate. He allowed himself a brief, calculated breath, centering his focus on the wounded man a few meters ahead. The groans of pain mingled with the distant roar of gunfire, a reminder that time was slipping through their fingers like sand. There was no room for error. He assessed the terrain in an instant. A narrow corridor between shattered vehicles, a half-collapsed wall offering temporary cover, and the enemy advancing in intermittent bursts from multiple angles. His mind raced through tactical options, each weighed for speed, efficiency, and risk. Then, without hesitation, he acted. He moved low, elbows brushing the rubble, eyes locked on the enemy's predictable patterns. He fired controlled bursts, each shot precise, each movement deliberate, forcing the enemy to adjust and exposing gaps in their formation. Smoke grenades hissed to life around him, cloaking his advance, obscuring vision, and drawing hostile fire away from the man he had sworn to protect. "Hold on," Traoré muttered under his breath, his voice firm but calm, a lifeline of assurance that even in chaos carried the weight of authority. His best man, barely conscious, turned his head, eyes widening in recognition and trust. "I've got you. Just stay with me." There was no time for fear, only focus, only the unbreakable rhythm of a leader and his responsibility. The enemy scrambled, startled by the audacity of a man advancing under fire with such precision. Some fired blindly, some hesitated, unsure how to respond to a force that refused to play by predictable patterns. Traoré exploited each pause with the fluidity of a dancer, moving, firing, feinting, and advancing, his body and mind synchronized to the pulse of danger. Every decision, every step was a calculation. Retreat was impossible, surrender unthinkable. The injured man's hand trembled, reaching instinctively toward Traoré, clinging as if their bond alone could defy the bullets raining around them. A sudden burst of gunfire forced Traoré to dive behind a half-collapsed wall, bullets striking the earth mere inches from his head. He rolled to the side, returning fire with steady hands, and spotted a narrow, covered path that could bring him closer without exposing his charge to further harm. "We're moving," he whispered, and, with a strength born of urgency, lifted the injured man onto his shoulders in a practiced carry. Pain flared across the comrade's body, but trust and relief shone through his eyes. He had been relying on this man for years, and now, in the direst moment, that reliance was vindicated. Soldiers around them froze, all mingling with disbelief. Even in the midst of violence, there was recognition. Leadership manifest in action, courage made tangible in the face of overwhelming odds. The whispers of Traoré, and he's doing it, spread quickly, voices tinged with hope. Allies who had been pinned down by fear felt renewed determination. The enemy's rhythm fractured under precision and composure, a leader who refused to be rattled. As they navigated through the maze of debris and gunfire, Traoré's mind never wavered. He scanned for traps, anticipating sniper lines, predicting patrol shifts. Every motion was deliberate. Duck, roll, pivot, advance. He spoke occasionally to his wounded comrade. Words brief but grounding, a tether to reality in the maelstrom. "You're going to make it, just a little further." His voice carried reassurance and command, a steady pulse that guided them both through peril. At one point, a soldier emerged from a hidden position, weapon raised, intent clear. Traoré reacted instinctively, his shot precise, disabling the threat without hesitation. The enemy fell silent for a heartbeat, uncertainty creeping into their confidence. It was not brute force alone that had carried them this far, but the controlled application of skill, strategy, and moral certainty. Traoré embodied the principle that heroism was not reckless courage, but the intelligent, deliberate act of saving life in the face of chaos. Hours, or what seemed like hours compressed into minutes, passed as he navigated the battlefield, inch by inch toward relative safety. Each movement carried the emotional weight of responsibility. This was not a simple extraction, but the preservation of trust, honor, and human life. When finally, they reached a position offering cover from the enemy's immediate line of sight, Traoré lowered his comrade gently, checking wounds, offering words of calm. Relief mingled with exhaustion, yet his eyes never left the surroundings. The mission was not over. Danger was still present. Still, the most critical act, the saving of a life that should not have been lost, had been achieved. Around them, the battlefield seemed to shift. Allies who had watched from positions of cover emerged cautiously, expressions of disbelief and admiration evident. The injured man's comrades rallied, inspired by the audacity and competence they had witnessed. Even amidst chaos, there was recognition. Leadership was alive here. Courage had manifested in its purest form, and loyalty had been proven. The ripples of Traoré's action extended beyond the immediate. Morale surged, and fear gave way to determination. In the midst of it all, Traoré allowed himself a fleeting acknowledgement of what had been accomplished, though he did not linger. Every decision, every movement, had been executed with calm precision, a choreography of survival, strategy, and empathy. The injured man's survival was a testament not to luck, but to skill, instinct, and an unbreakable bond of loyalty forged over years of shared service. Every soldier present knew they had witnessed something extraordinary, a demonstration of what leadership meant when it was guided by principle and courage rather than ego or recklessness. With the comrades safe, one final, unexpected challenge awaited. Traoré moved like a shadow, low and deliberate, weaving through the smoke-choked battlefield. Each step was measured, every breath a calculation, as he assessed the terrain and the enemy's positions. The ground was scarred with craters, twisted metal, and the remnants of what had once been a command post. Debris crunched beneath his boots, each sound amplified in the tense silence between gunfire bursts. He could feel the heat of explosions nearby, the vibrations of artillery rolling across the scorched earth, but his focus was absolute. Reach his best man, neutralize threats, and bring him to safety. Every instinct screamed caution, yet every fiber is being demanded speed. Hesitation could mean death. Enemy patrols moved in patterns that were almost predictable, yet the slightest misstep could trigger their attention. Traoré adjusted his path with precision, ducking behind shattered walls and fallen vehicles, crawling when necessary, eyes darting to anticipate every possible ambush. A sharp crack of a rifle shot nearby made him freeze for a heartbeat, then continue, calculating trajectory, distance, and timing as he advanced. He scanned rooftops, alleyways, and shell-ravaged streets, reading the subtle cues of enemy behavior. The way a shadow lingered too long, the glint of metal under the sun, the faintest echo of movement across rubble. Every step forward was a negotiation with death itself. As he moved, environmental hazards tested his resolve. Smoke choked his lungs, dust filled his eyes, and unstable surfaces threatened to give way beneath him. One misjudged leap over a crater could have plunged him into a trap, exposed to concentrated fire. Yet Traoré pressed on, relying on years of training, his body conditioned to navigate chaos while maintaining clarity of thought. He had learned to trust not only his eyes but his instincts, the silent signals of danger that whisper when the world seemed intent on betraying him. Then came the first ambush. A squad of enemy fighters, previously concealed behind a half-collapsed wall, opened fire with precision. Traoré's response was instantaneous. He rolled to cover, returning controlled bursts of gunfire, while recalculating the safest route to his friend. He threw a smoke grenade, creating a temporary veil, and shifted the engagement's dynamics in his favor. Every maneuver was deliberate, A distraction here, a calculated movement there, always keeping the injured comrade in mind. He knew that one misstep could cost not only his life, but the life of the man he had sworn to save. Time compressed and stretched simultaneously. Seconds became hours as Traoré navigated the labyrinth of danger. Each encounter tested his resolve, forcing split-second decisions that balanced risk and necessity. He suppressed instinctive panic, replacing it with controlled precision. Enemy gunfire erupted from multiple directions, yet he moved fluidly, exploiting the gaps in their formation, turning their arrogance into vulnerability. The wounded man's groans echoed faintly in the distance, spurring him onward, each sound a reminder of the stakes. Obstacles arose constantly, unstable debris hid in trenches, and sudden collapses threatened to trap him or expose him to sniper fire. Yet every hazard became an opportunity, every misstep a lesson in adaptation. He crouched behind rubble, peered over shattered walls, and timed his movements with the rhythm of enemy patrols, a dance of life and death in which hesitation was a luxury he could not afford. Finally, through the haze of smoke and the roar of distant gunfire, Traoré caught sight of his friend. The injured man lay sprawled amid the rubble, bloody but alive, his eyes wide with pain and disbelief. Relief surged through Traoré, but there was no time for it. Not yet. Every second still counted. Every shadow still threatened. Every heartbeat mattered. As he reached his friend, the world seemed to hold its breath. Ibrahim Traoré's story was one of discipline forged in the fires of relentless challenge. From the earliest days of his military training, he demonstrated an unshakable focus and a mind that grasped strategy as naturally as breathing. Drill after drill, exercise after exercise, he absorbed lessons not merely as rote commands, but as principles to guide action under pressure. While others relied on brute force or instinct alone, Traoré cultivated patience, observation, and foresight. Every maneuver became a study in cause and effect. Every tactical choice a step toward understanding the unpredictable rhythm of battle. Even his instructors, hardened veterans themselves, recognized a rare combination in him. The calm of a strategist, the courage of a warrior, and the intuition of a leader who understood that lives depended on clarity and decisiveness. Early missions tested him in ways textbooks never could. In his first deployment, he faced a hostile environment with insufficient resources, unreliable communication, and soldiers who questioned their odds. Many faltered under the weight of fear, but Traoré remained steady, moving through the chaos with deliberate purpose. He learned quickly that leadership was not about giving orders. It was about inspiring confidence, observing weakness, and making split-second decisions that could mean life or death. When an ambush threatened to collapse a mission, he directed his team with such clarity that what seemed like chaos became a coordinated withdrawal and counterattack. His ability to maintain calm under fire, to think several moves ahead while keeping his men alive and effective, earned him respect not through intimidation, but through competence and trustworthiness. What set Traoré apart was not just skill, but a moral compass that guided every decision. In moments when others saw opportunity for exploitation, he sought solutions that balanced tactical advantage with ethical consideration. Civilians were never collateral in his calculations. The lives of those under his protection were sacred. He understood that leadership extended beyond the battlefield, that reputation and loyalty were currencies just as valuable as bullets and explosives. His comrades came to know that when Traoré spoke, it was not because he craved obedience, but because he considered every consequence, every possible outcome, and weighed it against the lives of those he led. Loyalty for him was not a word, it was action, and courage, he knew, was not simply the absence of fear, but the decision to act decisively despite it. As his career progressed, his early successes gave way to assignments of increasing responsibility and complexity. Each mission demanded more than tactics. It demanded vision. He was trusted to lead units into volatile regions, often outnumbered and outgunned, yet he consistently demonstrated an ability to turn disadvantage into advantage. His leadership style combined strategic foresight with empathy. He knew the strengths and weaknesses of his team, understood their fears and motivations, and used this knowledge to elevate their performance. A soldier under Traoré was never expendable. Every life mattered and every action counted. This reputation for loyalty and meticulous care built not just effective teams, but bonds that would withstand the horrors of war and the pressures of critical decisions. Traoré's courage was not the reckless bravado of those seeking glory. It was a measured, purposeful force, rooted in the knowledge that hesitation could cost lives. He had repeatedly placed himself in harm's way to shield others, not for accolades, but because it was the right choice. His ability to remain composed while assessing danger, to act when others hesitated, made him uniquely capable of facing the unpredictable chaos of combat. And it was precisely this combination of foresight, moral integrity, and courage that prepared him for moments like this, a battlefield where every second was borrowed time, where a friend's life teetered on the edge, and where a single decision could redefine victory and failure in equal measure. Over time, Traoré became more than a soldier. He became a symbol of leadership under pressure, someone who earned trust through action and clarity. Soldiers under him learned that discipline did not mean blind obedience, but alignment toward a shared purpose. Comrades followed not out of fear, but because they believed he would never abandon them, because they knew that every decision he made considered their lives as sacred. In him, they saw a leader who could navigate the chaos of conflict with precision, a man whose calm under fire inspired others to find their own courage, and whose loyalty to those under his command would never waver. It was this rare combination, discipline honed through relentless training, courage tempered by conscience, strategic brilliance paired with empathy, that made Traoré uniquely equipped to face the challenge before him. Every lesson, every mission, every trial had prepared him for this exact moment. The battlefield around him was a storm of chaos and peril, but he carried within him years of experience, instinct, and moral certainty. He had faced impossible situations before, and each had shaped the leader he had become, decisive, unwavering, and utterly committed to protecting those who depended on him. This mission would test every skill, every instinct he had ever honed. The enemy forces were not faceless. They carried with them a reputation that preceded them, arrogant, ruthless, and precise. They had cultivated a myth of invincibility, one reinforced by years of victories and the brutal efficiency with which they crushed opposition. Every maneuver they executed seemed designed to intimidate. Every word of command barked with the authority of someone who believed the battlefield was theirs to command. Their confidence was a weapon in itself, a psychological edge that left weaker opponents trembling before any bullets were fired. Yet, for all their swagger and tactical sophistication, arrogance often masks vulnerability, and in this arrogance lay the first cracks that Traoré could exploit. These soldiers had seen countless skirmishes, yet even their past victories were littered with misjudgments. Overconfidence had led to miscalculations in previous engagements, turning supposed triumphs into Pyrrhic victories. Intelligence had often been trusted blindly, reconnaissance reports accepted without scrutiny, and their rigid adherence to protocol had blinded them to the ingenuity of opponents who refused to play by their rules. They had celebrated before the battle was truly won, underestimated those who moved differently, and punished themselves with the very hubris that made them fearsome. Each prior mistake left subtle traces, a pattern of overreach, a momentary lapse in discipline, a soldier distracted by the echo of past glories. Their ruthlessness was evident in every step they took. Civilians were treated as obstacles, not people. Dissent within their ranks was crushed instantly, often violently. It was a machine of dominance, a force that believed in victory through fear and unrelenting aggression. To them, hesitation was weakness, and weakness was intolerable. They approached every mission with the certainty of predation, every plan executed as though the enemy was already defeated. And yet, their world was rigid, predictable in its structure, and blind to the adaptive cunning of someone like Traoré, whose mind moved faster than the lines of control they so arrogantly assumed were absolute. On the battlefield that day, their presence was immediate and suffocating. Shadows flitted across the smoke-choked terrain, disciplined movements punctuated by the precise crack of rifles. They fanned out in formations that suggested confidence bordering on cockiness, speaking in clipped tones that carried authority to every ear within range. Their eyes scanned constantly, trained to detect hesitation, weakness, or fear. They believed themselves untouchable, assuming that the chaos around them only reinforced their dominance. To them, the fallen soldier, Traoré's best man, was a casualty among many, a symbol of their control and futility of resistance. They had no idea that this very act of cruelty would awaken the calm fury of a leader who refused to be intimidated. Despite their reputation, cracks had appeared before. A failed ambush weeks earlier had left several of their elite units exposed, a miscalculation in timing that cost lives and emboldened the opposition. A misread of terrain had trapped their forces in an unexpected choke point, allowing resourceful adversaries to turn their strength against them. Yet they had shrugged off these setbacks, dismissing them as anomalies, failures of circumstance rather than flaws in strategy or character. Their hubris blinded them to the fact that the battlefield demanded more than brute force. It demanded intelligence, adaptability, and a respect for resolve of those they sought to crush. Every approach, every maneuver, carried the weight of their arrogance, and yet it was precisely this overconfidence that created the opening Traoré needed. Calm, calculating, and unwavering, he observed the enemy's patterns with the clarity of someone who had learned to anticipate chaos. Where they saw opportunity for domination, he saw overextension. Where they assumed inevitability, he noted hesitation. Each motion they made, each command they shouted, was a piece of the puzzle, and Traoré's mind worked faster than theirs, connecting dots they did not even notice. They thought the mission was over, but Traoré was about to prove them wrong. The battlefield was no longer just a place of chaos. It had become a crucible of consequence. Every decision carried weight far beyond the immediate. Every heartbeat could tip the balance between survival and annihilation. Traoré's mind raced as he assessed the situation. This was not merely about rescuing a fallen comrade. His best man was not only a trusted ally, but a linchpin in the mission that had brought them deep into enemy territory. Losing him here could unravel the operation entirely, allowing enemy forces to capitalize on the breach and turning a tactical maneuver into a political disaster. Every second counted. One decision could mean survival or catastrophe. Strategically, the implications were immense. Traoré knew that his team's cohesion depended on trust and morale. If word spread that a key soldier had been abandoned, even a fraction of doubt could infect the ranks, slowing reactions, sapping courage, and giving the enemy an edge. His best man was a person who held critical knowledge of their approach routes, enemy patterns, and the delicate coordination of their forces. Without him, the precision of the operation would collapse, leaving them vulnerable to ambush and encirclement. The battlefield was a chessboard, and every pawn mattered. The loss of this one man could topple the carefully orchestrated moves of months of planning. Emotionally, the stakes were just as high. Traoré and his best man had fought side by side through firestorms and blood-soaked nights, sharing the burden of command and the weight of every life under their protection. Abandoning him now would be a betrayal not only to his friend, but to the very values that had guided Traoré's rise: loyalty, honor, and unshakable resolve in the face of adversity. The thought of leaving him behind ignited a storm of urgency and determination. His heart refused to let the casualty of one man define the mission. His conscience demanded action, swift and decisive. Politically, too, the outcome of this moment would resonate beyond the battlefield. Traoré's leadership was under scrutiny, observed not only by allies but by enemies and the wider world. A misstep could be interpreted as weakness, a crack in the armor of a rising leader whose decisions carried consequences for entire factions and communities. To act or fail to act, here would send a signal, powerful and lasting, about what kind of leader Traoré truly was. His choice would echo in the corridors of power, shaping perceptions, alliances, and the fragile balance of influence across the region. Around him, the enemy drew closer, their steps precise, their guns trained with deadly intent. Resources were limited: ammunition, cover, medical supplies, all precariously stretched. Time was merciless. Each second that passed tightened the noose around his comrade, reducing the window for action. Traoré's mind raced through possibilities, maneuvering under fire, creating diversions, moving swiftly to extract the wounded, all while keeping the team intact. It was a test of courage, intellect, and instinct, a crucible where hesitation meant disaster. And just when the danger seemed at its peak, a new threat appeared. The air was thick with smoke and the acrid sting of gunpowder. Explosions tore through the landscape, throwing shards of earth and metal into the chaos. Men shouted orders, some drowned out by the deafening roar of automatic fire. while others screamed in pain, their voices swallowed by the thunderous bombardment. Amid the chaos, one figure moved with uncanny calm, his eyes scanning the battlefield like a predator assessing every risk and angle. Ibrahim Traoré had faced danger before, but nothing had prepared him for this precise moment. The moment when his closest comrade, his best man in the Gaddafi corps, was struck down and lay motionless on the scorched ground. One wrong move could mean death, and his best man had just fallen. Traoré's heart pounded, not with fear, but with sharpened focus born of experience and instinct. The enemy was closing in from all sides, their silhouettes barely visible through the haze of smoke and dust. The wounded man's groans pierced the air, and every second that passed threatened to turn the tide irreversibly against him. Around him, men scrambled, ducking behind shattered walls, twisted metal, and the broken remnants of what had once been a command post. Traoré's gaze locked on his friend, who was bleeding profusely, eyes wide with shock and pain. Time slowed, the chaos around him fading into a background hum, every detail magnified. The tremor of his friend's hand, the desperate twitch of his boots, the faintest cry for help caught between the roar of battle. In that suspended moment, choices weighed heavier than lead. Retreat was impossible. Leaving his comrade meant certain death. Yet advancing carried risks beyond imagination. Enemy fire, hidden traps, the unpredictability of a battlefield gone mad. Traoré's mind raced through every tactical option, weighing speed against stealth, caution against courage. The world seemed to pause, holding its breath, as if the outcome of this single decision could ripple far beyond the blood-stained earth beneath them. Every instinct screamed urgency, yet a calm resolve settled over him. He would not abandon his brother in arms. Not now, not ever. Around him, the battlefield continued its brutal symphony, but Traoré's focus narrowed to one singular point: the man he had sworn to protect. The world, the enemy, the chaos, it all mattered less than the life teetering on the edge. But what Traoré did next would shock everyone on the battlefield.